it all kind of started. I started my own video production agency about a little over a year ago, and I was recognizing as I was doing this that there needs to be some sort of space that people can record video podcasts. Because when I was on my feed, I was finding podcasts all over the place. Like my shorts feed on YouTube was filled with it all the time. And so I was realizing, like, what if the common person in Cincinnati could have access to something like this? Like, what if a business owner could have access to something like this? Because it was such a genius way to be able to record content, right? You get so many different pieces of media out of it. Yes. And so I'm just like, and we'll talk about that more, but so I was thinking about this and I was like, okay, this is really cool. And then a buddy of mine I was talking with, he ends up wanting to build a podcast space inside of his building that he has. And I was like, oh, well, what if I took over it? What if I made it my space, but then you can use it or whatever, that sort of thing. And so I also looked and I was like, oh, it's a really boring name, but Cincinnati Podcast Studio exists as a URL. Like, why don't I buy that?
Yes.
And make this into something and kind of pursue it. And it was going to be kind of a side venture off of my company, Renegade Reels. Yep. But I was like, I don't know, this could also be its own thing. So I made a post on social media about this and said, hey, coming soon, the Cincinnati Podcast Studio. And then you commented.
So this is where I have to tell my part. So there's all of Brian's lead up. And in the meantime, so right now I work at my church as the director of communications. And I had been wanting to kind of, I had been dabbling in my own side business, Devising Good, and, similar things to Brian, video production, but there's some other things that I was doing, and man, I was podcasting was my favorite piece of what I was doing. Mm-hmm. I was doing a lot of virtual stuff, so not so much the in-person studio feel, but I had produced some podcasts that were in person. Yep. But man, like the more and more I thought about it, I was like, I think I really want to pursue video podcasting and helping organizations with video podcasting. And then this joke.
Well, you were thinking about this. You were thinking about this at the same time, and you're like, what if Devising Good became a online remote recording podcasting setup? So, yes, that was kind of the direction I was heading. I was like, I want to niche down instead of just doing multiple kinds of video production. Yeah. Plus, like, I knew Brian was doing Renegade Reels. I know so many of the video agencies in the Cincinnati area. Yeah. I'm like, man, I'm not sure I want to, like, compete with that necessarily. What if I did something completely different? Yeah. And so I was going to do, remote virtual video podcasting. I'd produce it. Sometimes I'd host, that kind of thing. Then this guy posts about this on LinkedIn, and I was like, dang it. Oh, no, because, like, knowing Brian, knowing his skills with production quality, I was like, oh, man, like, that's going to blow. My whole thing about not wanting to really be in competition with certain people, it's like, well, this is a thing. So anyways, I decided, you know what, I'm just going to message Brian and see, like, what's up. Literally not wanting anything more than I just want to see what he's doing, see if there's any differences in what we're pursuing, and kind of go from there. Yeah, and so you reached out, said, let's grab coffee. And so we go over to meet on the east side, grab some coffee. And while I was driving, I kind of had this weird moment where, like, over that week, it kind of felt like God was, like, giving me all these videos that were popping up in my feed that were talking about co-founders. Like, I had at least 2, maybe 3 videos that popped up, and I was like, oh, right, including Mr. Wonderful himself, Kevin O'Leary. He specifically said that one of his businesses would not have taken off if he had not had a partner. Yeah. Like, it literally would have died. Yeah. And so I was, like, driving, didn't consult my wife or anything about this, and I was just like, oh, well, what if Josh would be, like, I didn't even think about it before us having coffee. I was just like, oh, what if Josh wants to be a co-founder with me? And so then we start having coffee. 10 minutes into the conversation, you say, I'm planning to leave my job.
Yep.
And I'm like, oh, okay.
So that's all.
Yeah, it was great. And so for me, the biggest thing is Renegade Reels has been taking off like crazy. And I didn't have the bandwidth to be able to say I could do this on my own. Right. So I knew that I needed somebody whose skills complemented mine. Yeah. And it was hilarious how you and I have taken personality tests and we're literally the exact opposite of each other. It's so funny.
Yes.
But it works out so well because you have certain skills that I just don't have, and I've got other skills that you don't have.
Yes.
And so when you look at our website, it literally says creative genius and get crap done. Like that's our job titles right now. Right. And so it just worked out so good. Like I asked you then, you wanted to say yes in the moment, I could tell. Yes. But then you're like, okay, I need to talk to my wife. And I was like, oh wait, yeah, I should have done that too. and then like it was a couple days later and you're like, heck yeah.
Yeah.
Let's do this.
It just felt like what I think between knowing your skill set and then also thinking about like, I just felt like this would give such legitimacy to some of the stuff I was wanting to do, having a physical space.
Yeah.
And I think, man, it's really funny. I've been seeing all these posts on LinkedIn. Like, there's a lot of good that has come from people learning to do things remotely. Right?
Oh, yeah.
It's very helpful. But this interaction, like, one thing we didn't say is like we've known each other for like 24 years.
I was like 7, I think, when we first met. Like,
right.
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
And so like we've known each other for a long time, but like even just doing this versus virtually, it just gives a different feel.
Absolutely.
It's an in-person conversation.